sponsored by the League of Women Voters, the Sierra Club, and Sustainable World. So first I will introduce Margaret Purnell, who's the president-elect for the League of Women Voters, Pasadena area.
And I will say welcome again. Is this on? Can you hear?
Yes.
Yes. Is it good? Okay. So I want to welcome you in behalf of the League of Women Voters, and it's wonderful to see some new faces here, and that our community is coming together around environmental issues that are so important to our time. On the front desk are some League materials for you, and in case you are really interested and want to get more involved, we do have a Natural Resources Committee in the League, and we would love to have you participate. So there is a sign-up sheet there. If you're not a League member, you need to give us your contact information. Now, one more thing. At the end of this goes to 11, and across the street is the Pasadena Gun Buyback Day. And it does not mean people will be walking around with guns. Guns are to be kept in people's trunks, and they go to the police department, and then the policeman, a deputy, goes with them. So there's no one walking around with guns at all. And Thurgood Marshall, which is closed off, and you will see that street. It's just north of City Hall, and it dead ends at Euclid. It's perpendicular to Euclid. They're closing that off. They will have food trucks there and music, and so they want to make this a community event for people to come out and show their support for getting guns off the street and for gun safety. So we would love to see you over there as well. We will have a table, and so will, I'm sure, many other civic organizations. Okay, I think that's it, and we'll get started. We have a wonderful program prepared for you. Thanks again for coming.
And next we will have our two sponsors come and say a word about what they do. First is Dave Szymanski from the Sierra Club's Pasadena chapter.
Actually, I'm going to have Bill Joyce, a member of our Deputy Committee.
So now we have Bill Joyce standing in for Dave Szymanski.
Hello. Will you come? Thanks for coming. Should we have it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Hello. I'm Bill Joyce, and I'm an active member with the Pasadena group of the Sierra Club. For those of you who may not be aware of the Sierra Club or familiar with the Sierra Club, we're a national environmental organization. We started in 1892. We're one of the oldest, one of the largest. Our founder was John Muir, who I'm sure you've recognized the name from the local high school in Northwest Pasadena. He was a great outdoorsman and lover of the outdoors, and I think that his vision and his spirit infuses and continues to infuse our organization to this very day. Our emphasis is on getting people out into the outdoors so that they can learn to love and appreciate the outdoors. Sometimes in the course of our advocacy work, it's easy to get a little steam. It's always a good idea to take a walk in the mountains and get it in perspective again. So we'd love to invite you to join the Sierra Club if you're not already a member. Today's a good day, or anytime you feel up to it, you're welcome. And when you become a member of the Sierra Club, you're participating in not only local and regional advocacy work, but also our comparatively recent emphasis on global climate change. We're really right on board with that as well. You're a member of the national organization and the local chapter, and if you live here in the Pasadena area, you'll be encouraged to come and participate in our Pasadena group activities and outings as well. So we're at the back in case you would like to join, and thank you for listening.
Thank you. Now we have Bob Brummel, who's here from Sustainable World.
Thanks, Felicia. Good morning. I'm Bob Brummel from Sustainable World, and welcome to All Saints Church. Sustainable World formed 11 years ago. It is the economic justice and sustainability ministry here at All Saints, and We have had a number of major projects over time. We've been deeply involved in education, with book groups and film presentations. One of our main projects is Conscientious Projector, which is a monthly documentary film series, always on the second Thursday of the month, not on this campus, but at the Armory Center for the Arts. And through our association with the Armory, we have also been a co-sponsor of the annual Earth and Arts Festival, along with the City of Pasadena and other organizations. And our role there has been to stage a kickoff event for each of the Friday nights preceding the festival for the last 4 years, where we show a film in the park. And it's really a festive gathering, and we urge you to come back next year. We just had the event a couple weeks ago. And another project of ours that we devote a lot of energy, our steering committee does, is 10,000 Villages, which is this wonderful, if you haven't been there, it's a wonderful fair trade gift shop where they gather gift items from around the world, where we make sure, and the organization 10,000 Villages makes sure that the artisans are well compensated for their work, so you can feel really good about shopping there. And that's about all I have to say at the moment. We have a sign-up table in the back if you would like to be on our mailing list, where we will send you a monthly announcement of our Conscientious Projector film and keep you apprised of our other activities. See us at the table in the back. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much to our co-sponsors. The only problem with 10,000 Villages is they have great jewelry. So you never get out of there without a necklace or earrings. So my name is Felicia Williams. I'll be your moderator today, and I'll just quickly go through the program format, and then I'll introduce our speakers. So what we will do is we will have each speaker give an overview of their area of air quality policy and implementation. Each of the presentations will be about 15 minutes. Around 10 o'clock, we'll take a short break, and then we'll reformat the area, and then we'll go into a panel-style format where the audience can ask questions. So please hold your questions until the Q&A period. You can write it down and then ask a question in the Q&A on the microphone. So our first speaker today will be Ronda Bowen, who is the Ombudsman for the California Air Resources Board. In her role as Ombudsman, Ronda is an advisor to the community and resolves complaints. She also provides the public, like us, with the right resources to play a major role in the development of regulations that affect all of us. Shari Thomas is the Assistant General Manager for Pasadena Water and Power. She oversees the finance and administration for PWP, and PWP serves approximately 65,000 customers in the Pasadena area and parts of Pasadena. Lastly, we have Teresa Pisano from the Port of Los Angeles. She is the Environmental Mitigation Coordinator. Teresa monitors the implementation of the port's environmental mitigation measures, including impacts like aesthetics on the local communities. And lastly, I'm Felicia Williams. I'm the former chair of the Environmental Commission here in Pasadena, and I'd like to welcome our first speaker, who's Ronda Bowen.
Well, thank you for having me. It's going to be a wonderful and fast morning. There's quite a few handouts that I put on the Sustainable World table. For those of you that are going to have questions that we won't have time to answer, there's a primer on climate change, gives you a lot of the background. There is a map. This gives you some idea of what we're looking at, what we're facing when we talk about climate change. That's back there. And there's a number of other resources. We're going to also quickly talk about pollutants. Felicia specifically asked me to make sure that you guys have the information you needed to know the difference between greenhouse gas emissions and criteria pollutants, the smog forming ones, the ones that are regulated. So those resources are all on the table in the back, along with some others, and I encourage you to take them. All right, so California, as you can see is a very long state. It's about 1,000 miles long from the longest, we took the longest route from the south to the north. And the geography of our state has a tremendous influence on the regulatory structure here, on the way that we do regulations. So when you look at this map, you'll see that there's areas in Southern California, down here, where we are, that have a lot of mountains. Looks like a little air basin. That's LA. You guys are in the South Coast Air Quality Management District's jurisdiction. So that's your regulator for what we call criteria pollutants that we will cover later. The mountains hold and trap some of the pollutants more than in other places. We have a version layer that comes down. And so this geography is very important. It's also because our state has so many attractive places. You see that whether you're in Joshua Tree National Park, the Sequoia National Park, you decide to go up to Berkeley or Oakland, or you decide to go on up to Lassen or the Redlands National Forest, what happens? How do you get there? How many of you would drive? Okay. So huge amounts of vehicle pollution, and now we are so good, and we're a large economy, about the size of Italy and Spain. We can afford to buy things. And so where do those things come in? They come in at the ports, and they come in by land and from other states. And so we also have a lot of on-road traffic. And that traffic, one of the big pushes that we're doing is cleaning up the emissions from that traffic, cleaning up the particles, cleaning up the byproducts of combustion. So how did we get to doing anything about air pollution? Just a quick chart for you guys. In 1940, in New York, smog hits Radio City. That got a lot of attention. People were very excited about that. In July, right in the middle of World War II, Los Angeles was attacked, and the LA Times said, not by an enemy, but by a gas attack. And smoke and fumes were so bad in the city that the LA Times reported you couldn't see even 3 blocks. So in downtown LA. That also got a lot of attention, so much attention that one of the first things that happened is a Southern California gas plant was accused of being the culprit because it had to be coming from one place, right? Something had to be, and so they shut down temporarily a Southern California gas manufacturing plant that was making butadiene that went into rubber. And even when that was shut, to the surprise of everybody, the gas attack continued. So they realized this isn't a one source, one problem, this is a big deal. The deaths in Monroe, Pennsylvania, 18 deaths in one day, I think that number later went up to 20. And then the killer fog in London. So people were beginning to realize something had to happen. And a regulatory structure emerged. Congress and the President basically set the policy and send funding to where it's going to need to go, to the agencies that are responsible for implementing that policy. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, that's EPA, is responsible for all of the different air, water, land, air toxics, all of those different regulatory programs come through the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. U.S. EPA delegates their authority under those programs down to the states. California is one of those states. And in California, sometimes we have, because we are so large and because we are so diverse economically and geographically, we sometimes actually need a little more stringent regulations here. And so we have to get a waiver like we did for the zero emission vehicles from the U.S. EPA. Within California, we also have a unique structure compared to other states. We have the state of California, the Air Resources Board, where I work, which is regulating all of the consumer products and mobile sources. So if it drives, if it's self-propelled, it's regulated by the Air Resources Board. And if it's a stationary source, that authority then is delegated to the local air districts. So your South Coast District, and there's 35 districts throughout the state. So you should understand how the regulatory structure works, because if you have a local problem, you want to complain about a particular business, you want to give kudos, a particular business is doing a really great job, you think they should be a model for others, If it's a local stationary business that sits in place, you should be talking to the South Coast Air Quality Management District. If it's a company that drives up and down the road or that operates mobile equipment, then you should be talking to the Air Resources Board, probably to the Ombudsman. There are other governmental entities, and we will talk about them a little bit. Sustainable community strategies that are implemented by the regional governing bodies. I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through each of the criteria pollutants. These are the pollutants that the EPA regulates directly. There is a sheet on the back table that identifies each pollutant, tells you a little bit about it. Let me just tell you that all of these pollutants have health effects. Most of them affect your respiratory system in one way or another. The way that you're affected, the timing in which you're affected varies by pollutant. So some are acute, you have a short-term exposure, but it's very potent. That's one set of effects. You have a longer-term exposure, and that has a different effect. But ultimately, everything goes into your respiratory system to set up all other kinds of problems. That would be a whole separate discussion. The one thing that's unique, though, is ozone, and it is something that's not directly emitted. It is a product of photosynthesis, and it is when the sun interacts with gases in the atmosphere and particulate and volatile organic compounds. We do have good success. We have good success on several of these. In the later slide, we'll see how we have reduced some of these pollutants over time. But the one thing that's the great success of the last century is lead. Lead is a very highly toxic and potent chemical. By taking the lead out of gasoline, that one thing, we met the lead standard. Okay? So just so you know that regulations can and do work. This is just a quick, in 1976, for ozone as an example, we had 200 days above the standard. In 2010, we had 100 days. But important, the concentrations went down. So it's not only number of days, but how potent. The concentration is how potent this is. Is your coffee really weak, watery, tea, you can see through it? Or is it dark, rich color? That's one way of thinking about concentration. Along with the criteria pollutants came climate issues. Climate is a very important and very significant problem that we're dealing with. Anybody here think that we should not be addressing climate change? Just nod your head. All right. Well, there are people who don't believe that global climate change is happening, and there are people who don't believe that human activities influence it. And there are people who don't believe either of those things. They believe climate is happening, but they don't believe people are influencing it, or they believe people can influence climate, but we're not really making a difference. Just want to let you know none of that's true. These are the things that are happening. We are seeing climate change is what's actually happening out there. Weather is more of the thing you expect. You expect it to be raining, but the climate is a bigger picture than that. Globally, the Arctic ice caps are smaller. The Greenland ice caps smaller. And in the meeting that I was in yesterday, I think we heard you was there. We heard a speaker from NASA saying he, along with others, believes we passed the point of no return. So why do we care? How do we, you and I, what do we do that influences climate? We burn a lot of fuel. We use a lot of water. We use a lot of electricity. A significant part of the electricity that comes into this state, and another speaker will cover this, is moved the water that moves it, the way the electricity is generated. Is it coal? Is it petroleum? Even clean natural gas? All of that is taking fuel out of it's been sequestered for millions and millions of years and putting it in the atmosphere all at once. So we care because when you start having drought, you start having major climate things like Superstorm Sandy, it affects people. It affects our lives. So some people will say, well, we had, global warming 500 million years ago or something, and I wasn't here, were you? So these are just some quick looks at the temperature anomalies that we see. The hot spots are the dark red. Severe weather, we just had Superstorm Sandy, we had Hurricane Katrina, we had a lot of things. So we can do something or not. How many of you would rather do something? How many of you would rather not? It comes down to that, really. It's that simple, it's not complicated. What the state of California decided to do, your elected officials passed the Global Warming Solutions Act, AB 32, probably heard that name, and it really seeks to reduce emissions from the major sources: transportation, energy generation and use, large industrial sources, some contributions from agriculture and forestry, among others. The scoping plan went through an aggressive process of economic analysis. We have worked very hard to make sure that our regulations harmonize with the feds. What happened is that the federal government failed to pass an AB 32 equivalent. So now you have California. So one of the questions I always get is, are you in it by yourself? The answer is no. California is not in it alone. There are little nation states, I'll use that term, like California all over the world, in China, in parts of Indonesia, in Europe, all in Australia. There are places all over the world where local, smaller jurisdictions are working on this issue. So just to give you that, lots of success there. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. What this did was to change the way we regulate, bottom line. It caused all the agencies to come together, and now we're looking at a new approach. Instead of each agency doing what it does independently, we are working on bringing the regulation or the thinking about how you regulate criteria pollutants and the thinking about how you regulate or reduce greenhouse gases together. So not only are state agencies that have never really been collaborative, have they broken through those silos, but also the different agencies that regulate regulation. We can achieve the goals that we set. A long time ago, not so very long ago, but it feels like a million years now, people thought we couldn't have zero-emission vehicles. Anybody see the Leaf or the Tesla or any of those vehicles on the road? It took leadership. It took leadership not only from you, the people of this state, but also federal leadership and the leadership of the auto industry. So this is a myth that you can't have industry and government working together. It's a lie. Don't believe it. Don't be afraid of working with your industries. Don't be afraid of working with your government. Work together and we can do whatever we set out to do. So this is Kevin space that very well. Kevin Surex, the CEO of a company called Serious Materials, said, this is not, this whole place, the space we're in now, not just the chance of a lifetime, but it's a single chance in 100 years. And this guy does recycled building materials. So I encourage you to seize the opportunity. There's some links there, but you'll have all that on the back table anyway. And if you have any questions or issues with the Air Resources Board, you can call me. And if you see the ducts there, the reason they're there is because there's a clean duct and a dirty duct. And the clean duct is where we're trying to get, and the dirty duct is where we've been. And that's actually the result, the dirty duct is actually the result of being stuck in water where there were fuels jet ski test, where the fuel that was used in the jet skis was allowed to touch that duct for 10 minutes. That's what happened to him. His buddy on the side stayed clean. Thank you so much. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you so much, Ronda. That was very good information. A lot of new things that I did not know before. Who regulates what and how that's split up. So now we'll have Shari Thomas come. and do a presentation on Pasadena Water and Power.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good to see such an enthusiastic group of people here this morning, and appreciate very much and thank you, Felicia, for the opportunity to talk to you today. Pasadena Water and Power, of course, for those of you who live here, as you know, we're your locally owned water and power utility, and we respond to the needs of our community and the desires of our community, and our goal is to meet those objectives from the community in a reliable and cost-effective manner. So we're always very careful to consider all the elements. AB 32 certainly had a big impact on the electric utility, especially. And one of the things that Pasadena Water and Power did was embark on development of an integrated resource plan for energy. And that was a process that began in 2008 and culminated in early 2010 or late 2009. And the objective was to involve the community in a very broad and far-reaching effort to find out what we could do to involve the procurement of energy resources in a 20-year plan. Because the electric utilities especially, we don't build for the short term. We don't build Apple iPhones where you're going to have to upgrade in 6 months. We build power plants, and we build infrastructure that's designed to last for 30 and 40 years. And so what the integrated resource plan was intended to do is to say, for the next 20 years, how is Pasadena going to get its energy and from what resources? And what's shown here on the slide is Pasadena actually adopted a renewable portfolio standard, which is something that says this is how much of each type of energy we're going to have for the next 20 years. We adopted a goal where 40% of Pasadena's energy will come from renewable resources by 2020. And the state of California adopted through AB 32 a similar goal, but it was 33% by 2020. So that 40% goal, I think, really reflects the city's and the ratepayers, especially the interest that we have in not only meeting but exceeding state goals for renewable energies. And the small, the little part of the graph off on the left that shows the actual numbers, I hope that demonstrates that we have really come a long way. And we are exceeding our own interim goals that were set in 2009. So in 2011, which is the last, it's all done by calendar year, so we were at about 24% of our portfolio of renewable energy. And that was up from somewhere around 5% before we did the integrated resource plan and implemented our changes. So we have numbers for 2012, they're about the same. We do have challenges, and renewable projects are tough to come by. They're expensive still, they're getting much more efficient, and they're using technology to become less expensive, but they still are expensive. And they tend to be built in Idaho, in Montana, in Washington, where the wind blows, or they're in the desert where the sun shines. But we have to have transmission lines to bring that clean energy into the city, and that's where the real challenge comes from. But I think the good news is that we are at and exceeding the goals that we had set for ourselves. This is the resource mix for Pasadena Water and Power as it stands today. And as I mentioned, about 24% of it is coming from renewable energies and smaller amounts from other sources such as hydroelectric, which is primarily Zusa hydro facility. Natural gas, we burn natural gas in our share of the Magnolia Power Project in Burbank, and we also burn natural gas here locally in the power plant in Pasadena. Still, over half of our energy is derived from a coal facility, primarily in Utah. It's the Intermountain Power Project, and Pasadena has been a part of that project since its inception. I believe it came online in about 1984. And we have reduced our dependence on that facility, but we are still primarily reliant upon it. Part of the integrated resource plan that was adopted by the City Council calls for a 35% reduction in coal-powered energy by the year 2016. And so we are making every effort to meet that goal. The interesting thing is the Intermountain Power Project, Southern California participants, especially Los Angeles, but other cities like Riverside and Anaheim and Glendale, Burbank, along with Pasadena, are really the primary users of that facility. And so, as you know, most California utilities, municipal utilities, have the same goal. We all want to reach at least the 33% renewable number, perhaps even more in the case of Pasadena. And so everyone's trying to divest themselves of the coal generating facility. And so finding the users for that, finding a way to either reduce the output from that facility. There's a number of very complex issues that are being dealt with in order to reduce our dependence on coal. And again, for every megawatt or megawatt hour less we take from coal, we have to replace it with something. Because people still want their energy. They still want to be able to use energy, albeit much more efficiently than we did before. So our challenge as a utility is to make sure that we can meet those goals while still maintaining, competitive rates. One of our council members is, happy to tell us the story. He goes to his district meetings periodically and he talks about energy and cost of renewable energy at every meeting. And he asks the people who attend his meetings, how important is it? How many of you want renewable resources? Every hand goes up. And then he says, how many of you would be willing to pay 5% more? The hands stay up. 10% more. The hands are still up, but there's a little bit of that. And at 15% or 20%, the hands are coming down. And so it's difficult. People are very much interested in this, but it is something that we have to be aware of, that we also have to balance the cost and do this in a very thoughtful and mindful way so that we reduce the impact on people's bills as much as possible. One of the big parts of the integrated resource plan is efficiency goals. I'm very pleased to announce that, or to report that Pasadena's efficiency programs are very successful. We are meeting and exceeding our goals right now. We save about 12,500 kilowatt hours of energy each year cumulatively through our efficiency programs. And so you can see that if things continue as projected, we'll be at about 11 or 12% of our energy demand being met through efficiency programs. And this is the replacement of refrigerators and CFL light bulbs and that sort of thing, but also big commercial replacement of chillers and air conditioning systems. And this is funded in part by programs that Pasadena Water and Power promotes. This is just very quickly shows that even though we are expecting a slight increase in energy demand between now and over the next 10 years, we actually expect our retail sales to fall because more of that demand will be met with efficiency. One of the things that we are participating in, and this is the Air Resources Board program, is what we call the cap and trade program. And so all utilities they receive emission allowances. So from the California Air Resources Board, they assess each utility and find out how many tons of emission each utility is responsible for. And it's not only utilities, it's also transportation companies. And so they allot a certain number of emission allowances to each utility so that we can meet our requirements. So this is just an example, but in 2011, all of the City of Pasadena's generating activities, Intermountain Power, Magnolia Power Project, our local generation, produced about 724,000 tons of greenhouse gas emissions, or CO2. And so as the cap and trade program developed, which basically says we're going to cap your emissions, and any emissions that you receive beyond that, you're going to have to trade allowances for in an auction. And so we can trade allowances with other utilities that have reduced their emissions, primarily some of the Northern California utilities that are more dependent on hydro, that have lower emissions in the first place. There's an auction market for us to be able to trade our emissions. And so without going into great detail, I think the one thing, there have only been 2 auctions. The third one is coming up next week. The very first one was in the last quarter of 2012, where the emission cost per ton was $10, or $10.09. That same emission credit had gone to $13.62 by the first quarter of 2013. And as we enter the auction next week, we're expecting anywhere between $14.50 and $15.50 per emission credit. So as you can see, those credits are becoming more and more valuable, which is in one sense a good thing, because the idea is to drive emissions down. The more expensive it is to emit, the less we emit. But it is a cost adder. And so we're, again, mindful if we look at everything that we're doing, we have to take this into consideration as we price our energy. This is not something we're related to. I just wanted to talk just slightly again about where we're headed from here. I mentioned the IRP. That was initially developed in 2009. It's updated every 2 to 3 years for sure, depending on how volatile this industry is. We didn't talk a lot about rates here today so far, but I think that, nobody's going to be surprised to know that all of this is going to have an impact on rates. Rates will go up. We are in the process right now of completing a cost of service study, which is really a rate analysis. We have a consultant on board who's helping us work through how much revenue will the utility need going forward to maintain our poles and vaults and the wires that bring the electricity into people's homes. So we are in the process of doing that. We'll have some rate recommendations before the council probably within the next 3 to 4 months. Many of you are aware that we are in the process of rebuilding our local power plant here in Pasadena. We have a 40-year-old plant right now, not very efficient, and we are in the process of coming forward with a capital program to rebuild that plant into what we call a combined cycle natural gas facility. That is part of our budget. The environmental impact report was approved by the City Council just a couple of weeks ago. We are working with the Southwest Air Quality Management District to get a permit, hopefully within the next few weeks. So construction would be set to begin on that facility later this calendar year. So we're really searching hard to continue to get new renewable projects, both on our own and through the Southern California Public Power Authority, which we are a member. We are right now looking into 2 solar programs that we would like to invest in that would help us, again, to increase that portfolio of renewables. And so we are very active. We have at least 1 full-time staff member dedicated to watching these legislative and regulatory developments to make sure that we stay on top of this. It is something that's really important to us, obviously, and our ratepayers have expressed that same sort of interest. One of the things that I did want to talk a little just very briefly about, though, is as we look at the rate impact, I find myself always having to put 2 hats on the same head. The business and finance part of me says, how can you encourage efficiency and spending more money than you have to provide a service, because it drives down your bottom line and it looks at, from a business perspective, it looks really funny. Out there constantly promoting to, use less of what we sell. Turn off your lights, more efficient, be more efficient. So, as a business person, I'm saying, how do you resolve that in your mind? But realizing, as I actually watch this happen, about how effective these efficiency programs are, and how people are really embracing it, even though many of us have more than 1 big television in our house now, and we use computers and we use gaming devices. There is a real push to people to use these more efficiently, to use them in ways that are much more environmentally conscious than we have been. Pasadena Water Power's, our mission really is reliability and cost effectiveness and environmental stewardship. And so we're trying to combine those things, even though the challenge continues. We try to keep the rates as reasonable as possible. Our objective is to stick to that mission, and you'll be hearing a lot more about these kind of programs, and I really appreciate the time that you took today to listen. We welcome you. We encourage you certainly to go online. We have a great annual report out there. We didn't print a lot of copies this year because part of being an environmental steward is to reduce the paper. But we encourage you to go on the cityofpasadena.net website, go to the Water Power Department, and you'll see our annual report, which will provide a lot more information about our financial condition as well as the programs that we have coming forward. So I very, very much appreciate your time today. I look forward to the questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, and last but not least, we will go to the Port of Los Angeles. And we have Teresa Pisano.
Well, thank you for having me here today. I'll give you a brief overview of the port and some of the programs we have in place to reduce our air emissions and our climate emissions. And I'm sorry, I have the notes I need to. Okay, so the port is adjacent to the Port of Long Beach. The Port of Los Angeles was founded in 1907. It's a department of the City of Los Angeles, so sometimes you'll hear it referred to as the Los Angeles Harbor Department. We're a proprietary department of the city, which means that we are self-supporting, raise our own, we don't use taxpayer money to support ourselves. It comes from the business of the port. We are a landlord business. Most of the terminals and retail operators in the port are tenants. They own their own equipment. We just serve as a landlord to them. We only manage a few of our own facilities. There are 7,500 acres of land and water. Currently, there are 270 berths and 27 cargo terminals. At the port, we have a diverse operations. We have marinas for commercial or recreational boats. We have a fishing industry, both commercial and sport fishing industry. We have cruise ships that call there, some commercial and retail, and with the bulk of our business being in cargo movement. We have both containerized cargo and non-containerized cargo. When we refer to containerized cargo, we always think of it in terms of TEUs, which is a 20-foot equivalent. So when you see on a ship these containers, which you probably see also on trucks and rail moving through the area, typically one of those large containers is 2 TEUs. So that's a 40-foot container that you see there. Some of the top imports that come through the port, and again measured in TEUs, these numbers are for the 2011. Top imports are furniture, automobile parts, clothing, electronic products, and footwear. And our top exports are waste paper, scrap metal, animal feed, cotton, and resins. Catching up on my notes here, okay. The job sector related to port operations and good movement is the fastest growing job sector in California, in Southern California. Nearly 900,000 jobs in the region are connected to the Port of Los Angeles operations. It's measured, it says it's 1 in 8 jobs that are related to port operations. On the national level, an estimated 3.6 million jobs are connected to cargo and goods movement operations tied to the Port of Los Angeles alone. This slide shows some statistics in terms of tax revenues generated by the jobs and industries tied to our ports. Now this slide is a slide that was produced by the, I think this is the APMD slide. And what this showed were health impacts in the Southern California Air Basin, or the South Coast Air Basin. And what it's showing is health risk, and this was measured from, this was a comparison of 1998 data to 2005. And the pink areas and the dark areas show the concentrations of the highest pollution and health risk. And as you can see, it's right where the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach are. So this was a slide from 2005. So at that time, when both ports came together to see what can we do to make a change. We have focused most of our years on growing business and development of the port, rather than what the impact of the port was to the local communities and beyond. And so both the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach, even though we are competitors, came together to look at what the impacts are from the ports. The source categories we look at are heavy-duty vehicles, ocean-going vessels, locomotives, cargo handling equipment, and harbor craft. And so, just to give you a snapshot of when a ship comes to the port, it comes in usually, so there's a ship and those emissions coming from that ship. It's usually let into the harbor by 1 or 2 tugboats. Those also produce emissions. It docks alongside a berth. They may turn off their main engines and then run on auxiliary engines, which continue to produce pollution at the berth. And then a container is unloaded from a ship-to-shore crane, which those are electric, these big ship-to-shore cranes. Everything else so far is diesel. And then it is put onto a yard tractor or a utility truck. They're called different names, but it's the same equipment. That takes it to a stack that's then picked up and moved into the stack by another type of crane. Those are all diesel equipment. Then a truck comes in, or it's put on rail, and those take it outside of the area, and that's also diesel equipment. So that gives you an idea of all the impacts from moving a container in the harbor, or out of the harbor. Oh, I didn't realize I jumped ahead, but okay. So in 2006, both ports produced a cleaner action plan, which was the plan for how to reduce the impacts from the scenario I just explained to you. We used 2005 as a baseline for our emissions, which was that slide I showed you earlier that showed all the pollution in the area. We met our initial goals in the first 5 years of our cleaner action plan, and so we updated the plan in 2010 with more longer-term goals. We set health risk reduction standard, which is to reduce our diesel particulate matter by 85% by 2020. So since 2005, we've been successful in reducing diesel particulate matter by 71%, NOx by 51%, and sulfur oxides by 76%. We've been able to do that with implementing programs like our Clean Truck program. Drayage trucks are the trucks that come to the harbor, pick up a container, and move it out of the harbor. We had a commissioner that said, well, we can't let dirty trucks come here anymore. And we thought, well, how are we going to do that? How do you keep, well, we've gone away. And so as of January 1st, 2012, all of the trucks that move containers in the port have 2007 EPA standard engines, or they can come into the port. That made a big impact. Also, we have programs that target our ocean-going vessels that are vessel speed reduction program. That is a carb supported. That vessels need to slow down, or actually, vessel speed reduction I think is still a voluntary program. After 20? Okay. As ships come towards the harbor, they reduce their vessels at 40 nautical miles. Is that part's voluntary still? Anyway, if they slow down at 40 nautical miles or 20 nautical miles, it makes a big difference in the amount of emissions that are coming out of their stacks, and we've seen a big impact from that. And we have ways of tracking all the speeds of the ships coming in, so we're able to track that and calculate the emissions from that. Also, you probably heard of shore power, or AMP is what we call it at the port. Because when a ship does come in, I mentioned that when they come to berth, they'll turn off their main engines, but still have the auxiliary engines on, which continue to produce emissions. Now with AMP, ships have been retrofitted. Some ships, when we say some, it's been an expensive process, but some ships have been retrofitted so that when they get to shore, they can plug into electricity and completely turn off their engines. And so that's also made a big impact. Also, CARB's low sulfur fuel rules have made a large impact on pollutants in the harbor area. In addition, the port has some incentive programs that we are trying to implement with the ship operators, where we encourage them to bring their cleaner ships. This is a tough area to make a difference in, because ships usually are deployed in another part of the world. And so what we've done is there's a program called Environmental Ship Index. That's actually a worldwide program with some European ports, and we're the first North American port to join in, that encourages ships with cleaner technologies or cleaner engines to call out our port. And if they do, they receive a financial incentive, whether it's a break on their docking fees or just a financial payout. We encourage that. It's not much, but I think as you get more and more ports joining in, that ship will make a lot of calls along the string, and it could be financially incentive for them that way. Part of our Cleaner Action Plan was to develop our Technology Advancement Program, which has made also a big difference in the reduction of pollutants. Each Port of Los Angeles and Port of Long Beach contributes $1.5 million annually into this fund. We have technology developers that will approach us and say, I have a technology I'd like to demonstrate on a ship, and I have a project partner. And the both ports will look at those proposals, and we work with the California Air Resources Board and the South Coast Air Quality Management District and the EPA to decide which of those technologies are going to really benefit us in the long run. I'm talking so much, I've been in 5 minutes. I'm going to jump ahead and tell you that In addition to our technology advancement program, in 2011, we also developed zero emission roadmap. This is also something with the Port of Long Beach. This is our plan to, again, the same commissioner that told us we aren't going to let dirty trucks come here also told us we're going to have a zero emission port. And we thought, that's science fiction. How does that happen? Well, you know what? We're getting there. As you mentioned, I think, we didn't have electric cars just a few years ago, and now we're testing electric drayage trucks. We're testing electric yard equipment, and we're plugging in ships. And so we're moving in that direction. It's very costly, and it takes time, especially in port operations. There's a real difficult workload that this equipment goes through, and we're finding difficulties in electric, keeping that, having a long enough life of that battery. But we're working on it and making it coming a long way. In addition to our air quality programs, we are looking at our carbon footprint, both what the port does, what our tenants do, what the footprint is of getting something from China to Los Angeles and out to the rest of the nation. So we're looking at that, and we're working very closely with the agencies, and we've developing our inventories. And our goals for our greenhouse gas plan is in line with CARB, and we're working very closely. And I'm just jumping through to one of being in the Port of Los Angeles, we've realized that the goods movement industry is about 3% of worldwide greenhouse gas emissions. And so we are working collaboratively with other countries and other agencies who are looking at similar problems that we do and coming up with solutions. We have developed carbon calculators with these groups and share with other ports worldwide, and collaborate with staff exchanges between different ports groups, hoping that we can all come up with a solution that we can all live with. We have a lot of information available on our port's website. Feel free to go there. We have all of our air emission inventories. We've done one annually since 2005. Or 2006, and they're all on the port's website. If you have any questions, here's my contact information, or through the port's website. Feel free to contact anyone in the environmental group with your questions.
Thank you so much. There's a lot to learn here. I didn't realize that the cap and trade prices had been projected essentially where they were projected before. And I also had no idea when we could export trash and bring in goods. At the point, I need to rethink our shoe buying policy after that presentation. So what we'll do now is we'll take a 5-minute break. There's still some goodies at the table that we'll bring it right up. Okay, everyone, you can take your seats. We're going to get started again. So this is a part of the program where you get all of your great questions together, and we will ask our panelists questions about what they talked about and also about what they do in the air quality policy space. So I have the microphone. If somebody wants to ask a question, raise your hand, and then we'll just go in order and use a microphone. Please wait till you get the microphone so that everybody can hear your question. So do we have a first question? We'll go here and then go west.
I had a question about an estimate in particular matter, and actually I would like to ask you for a comment here too. What happened was about 2 years ago, the city was considering developing an air plot near our neighborhood, and it was right under the 134 freeway. I filed a comment letter, and I included some studies from the USC School of Public Health, citing the impact of near roadway particulate matter on people. What happens is the trucks and all kick up particulate matter, and it's elevated in concentration real near the roadway, and then it falls off the background level, which is still above the health standards. At the hearing, the staff didn't really seem to take into account the near roadway. And the problem is that they will consider putting housing on it. How this relates to Pasadena now is, of course, everyone knows about the 710 extension. That will bring more truck traffic, but I don't know if the EIR, I'm regional, and I don't know if the EIR actually discussed near roadway impact, because people who are living close to whatever extension or however it is will be seeing more near roadway impact. So it's kind of a rambling question, but I do this work. And I got to see, took some tours down in the communities here in the South Bay and Harbor. It's kind of distressing to see what happens down there and listen to some of the health impact. So I'd like to know if Pasadena does consider the roadway impact in city planning, and is that translated over to
So that's probably going to be a question for Ronda. Are there restrictions on how close you can build to a roadway? I know that I got a petition from West about not building within a certain number of feet of the 210 freeway, and so there are local initiatives to do that. But is there any sort of statewide policy being developed about what we know about freeways now and their impact, and not building close to freeways?
Yeah, there's it's me every time. There's really three parts. One, there are the zoning restrictions and those kinds of things that cities have that affect what can be built there. We don't have anything to do with that. The local air district will, part of the sustainable community strategies that the local communities are building that integrates their transportation plan will have some effect on the planning that cities do. We don't directly affect that. The question about whether or not there are health effects and what those health effects are close to roadways is something we care a lot about, and we've spent quite a bit of money. I feel a little bit like I have a conflict of interest because my husband, Scott, is part of the study process for these kinds of things. So the Air Resources Board some time ago adopted a plan, a guideline, if you will, for where housing can be built that's safe. There are always debates, and I don't remember the exact, do you remember, was it 50 feet? So I don't remember what the exact setback was. There are always debates about whether that was adequate, left an adequate margin of protection. What we have found since that was adopted is two things. One, we're learning more about the health effects of particulate, and what we're learning is not encouraging. It's not like we're suddenly finding out it's not a problem. The other thing is that the vehicles that are on the road, the trucks, for example, in particular, anything that runs diesel, has also been subject to tighter standards. So the trucks, for example, that were going back and forth on the port on the 710 freeway, that we're seeing, this conflict is in my head, but better numbers that the cleanup that we're doing is actually working. In other words, the trucks are getting cleaner. It does not mean they're clean. It means that they are cleaner and that we expect fewer health effects if they're cleaner. But exactly how far the setback is and whether that's adequately protected, the answer is the Air Resources Board does have a guideline. I don't know it off the top of my head. We believe it's protected, but it is just a guideline. So there's no rule that says that a city has to abide by that guideline. It is a guideline that the planning agencies use in making their local decisions.
Okay. Another question here?
Yeah, actually, I'm going to speak to that really quickly and then I have my question. The agency I work for, day one, we use the guideline actually to give recommendations to the city of Pasadena as part of the general plan update. And CARD recommends a 500-foot setback, at least from the freeway. However, I saw some of the new research that came out, air studies along the 210. It's that the south side of the 210 is really more impacted in Claremont, where they did some of the sampling. So I'm not sure if CARD was able to do any sampling locally, but Pasadena is going to do an EIR now in the general plan update. They're really looking at infill development in the central district. So what they end up proposing in Pasadena would be hugely beneficial if we could do some air quality testing along our portion of the 210 freeway. However, my question is for Pasadena Water and Power. I know Sacramento Municipal, the Water and Power District, they have a community-based solar program that's trying to tap into folks who either are folks who live in apartments or condo owners or have single-family homes that aren't well suited for solar power. And they allow those persons to invest in joint solar facilities that are local, so either on schools or government properties, and as a means for them to invest locally in renewables, since they don't have the opportunity to do so in their own homes. I'm not sure if that's something Pasadena has considered yet, but it would seem to be one way to reach those renewable standards that you're trying to meet locally.
Yeah, we're actually reviewing our entire solar investment opportunity program. Whether or not it's something that PWP offers some financing alternatives for folks. One of the things that we are looking at is other agency programs. And Sacramento Municipal Utility District has got a lot of these kind of very forward-looking programs. We do not have that particular program in place right now, but as we evaluate, what kind of solar opportunities we have in the city, that is one of the things that we would be looking at. We just don't have it yet, but it is a great program. We've read a lot about it, and it seems like something that we could certainly pursue.
Actually, a follow-up question to that, Shari, is so I have solar panels on my roof. Through the Green Power program, can somebody pays into that program an additional fee? Can they actually purchase energy from my solar panels? I must have that before. And do my solar panels count towards our 40% RPS?
I'm not sure I understood the first part of the question about somebody actually.
Oh, the Green Power. If somebody invests in the Green Power program, are they paying for our local generation, or does it go to a wind farm in Washington?
Oh, right, I see. Okay. No, the solar panels that produce locally and feed back into Pasadena's grid are Pasadena's green energy. So those are counted towards our local energy supply. So as far as whether or not your individual panels are part of our 40% portfolio, I believe the answer is yes, that we count local solar generation as part of our renewable portfolio. Right now, it is a pretty small percentage still, but we do have a very active program, and it's growing. I mean, it's amazing how people are really interested in that. And I think because the technology is improving so much, and the prices are starting to come down, that hopefully that program will expand even further. So those are considered local programs.
Hi there. I wanted to ask Ronda, this is a different wavelength, but it's about the political aspect of climate change and what you're up against in terms of in Washington. I mean, I've seen what's happening with the election of the head of EPA, the questions that she's getting hammered with, upwards towards 1,000. When there's so many parties that have so much to gain with not having air quality control standards in place and having more progressive standards, how do you counter that? And what is the role of just everyday people in that? We've seen what tar sands, people rising up against that can do. What is the climate for you, no pun intended, politically, and what can people do to support what needs to happen?
Question. When the public when the public is engaged, actively engaged, it does make a difference. I just want to encourage you in that way. And the question is, what are we, meaning the Air Resources Board, up against when there are forces, like in any battle for anything, there are people who believe that climate is happening, people who believe that climate change is not happening. There are some who know that climate change is happening, but their economic interests are opposed to making a change in their lifetime. And speaking to groups, I had a man come up to me after a talk a couple of years ago, and he said, I know climate change is detrimental. And I don't have any children. I don't expect to have any, and I frankly don't care. I don't want to pay more today for something that's not going to affect my life. So there's people who see things in that way, and the beautiful thing about being in this country and our Constitution and everything is we respect everybody's point of view. And while respecting the point of view, it doesn't mean that you don't work just twice as hard to make your point of view become the reality. So the fact that we have made a lot of progress on the local level, on the state level, New York is doing things, Oregon is doing things, many states are moving ahead on climate policy absent a federal approach that's really, really workable. To the extent that anybody in this room knows anybody that live in California, encourage them to work with their state to model what we're doing. To the extent that you have legislators and you deal with them, if you don't have a relationship with your legislator, you should, especially your congressional ones, your federal reps, but also your state reps. Let them know that you really care. The work that the League has done, the Sierra Club has done, that many organizations are doing to try to move things forward is important. It's effective and it matters. We're tough. We can take the bullets. We can take the criticism. It doesn't matter. We're used to it. That's our job. But what we can't do is make a change without the support of the citizens. And so you just have to keep doing what you're doing. California did a wonderful thing when the oil industry in Texas got behind trying to undo AB 32 with a uniquely named Proposition 23. What happened? California voters said, you know what, we're willing to pay an extra price. Somebody said, raised our hand to a certain extent. We're willing to pay more. We're willing to take the risk. We know it's hard. We know mistakes are going to happen. We are willing to do it. And what did we do? We defeated that proposition hugely until it took completely away all of the wind out of the sails of our opposition in terms of directly attacking what we were doing. But what happened is they began to do more in other states to try and undo the policies that were trying to come forward on the federal level. It always happens, so just expect it. Don't be discouraged by it. Just smile, keep your faith, and just work that much harder. You can do this. We can do this as a nation. We can do this as a world. We just have to not be selfish. We have to think and work together, and we can do this. That's how we do it. Thank you.
You, Shari. This is the first that I've heard about the new coal plant in Pasadena, and I'm just wondering. Yes. I'm just wondering why, however many billions of dollars are being put into that, are not being put into renewable energy sources.
That's an excellent question. If I refer back to the integrated resource plan, again, that was a blueprint that was laid out for at least 20 years. It's expected to be renewed every 2 or 3 years. I guess I would say that it's difficult at this point in time to envision a zero-emission utility. Not possible, but it's difficult for us to get there from here at this point, simply because of the cost and the reliability factors. We do not yet have renewable resources that can provide electricity 24/7, 365. They are not available in quantity enough. They're still price prohibitive, and so we're still looking at other options to make sure that we have reliable delivery. That's really the biggest key for us. As you know, we have a local plant here. We have had local plants in Pasadena for decades. And the last one, the biggest one that we have is now 40 and 50 years old. They don't run very much. They're not running 24 hours, 7 days a week. They're designed to provide reliability. When the peak demand goes higher, then we can import from other sources. And so what this will actually do, the investment will put much, much cleaner burning energy in Pasadena. So rather than an old broken down plant that doesn't run efficiently, this plant will be far more efficient. It will actually provide that reliability at a much lower emission than we currently have in Pasadena. And we can't import enough energy into Pasadena from outside sources to provide all of our needs. The connection point that we have in East Pasadena simply isn't large enough to do that. And so what we have, and it's all on the east side of town. So the plant that's here at the end of Arroyo provides backup energy to the west side of town. And it also, like I said, only runs when there's peak demand. And so the investment there is to provide a resource long-term that will provide that reliability and will be able to firm up the renewable energies that we're bringing in. Because right now, the wind and the solar piece of it still requires that firmer resource behind it.
It seems to me that if you're just building a backup facility, then that's the perfect place for this renewable energy. It doesn't make any sense to me, that's another reading that, to spend all of this money on a dirty facility, even if it's the cleanest of the dirty facility we have. Is there any way to change that plan? That's my question.
What I would recommend, the movement on that power plant is pretty far down the road. It was accepted and approved by the City Council as part of the Integrated Resource Plan. As I mentioned, we have permits. The environmental work has already been done and is approved by the Council. But I would offer that the objective there is to have, it's a reliability issue. Because one of the things that we have to be able to do is to make sure that we can provide reliable energy no matter what. And we still aren't at a point yet where we can completely rely on renewable resources to do that. What I would suggest is, as we come forward with the next update of the Integrated Resource Plan, that input such as you're suggesting is it's a perfect place for that.
Actually, I think also if you live in the city, your city council person, they're the people who vote on this. So if they know that you have a concern about it, then they can also ask questions and sort of help come up with different plans. So that's kind of the place to go.
One more, sorry. You know how you ask people to raise their hand and they pay a dime more, 20% more, right? Maybe you should ask people, given the seriousness of this climate change issue and the severity of the damage that has already been done and it will be done by this new plant in Pisano, perhaps you should ask people if they are willing to go without power intermittently. Maybe when people start to feel the climate change, actual change might happen. I think we can get to zero emissions a lot sooner if people don't have reliable energy all the time. I mean, I want it too, but we're beyond that.
So actually, just one, before I get to that question, I did want to ask Teresa a question. I didn't realize that the port is not tax funded until I saw your presentation. And so many of the arguments against environmental policy are that they hurt business. This was kind of the premise of Prop 23, that we're hurting businesses with our environmental policies. Everybody's moving to Nevada and Texas because of these things. But since you actually deal with the businesses and you are putting policies on the businesses and they pay you, how have they responded? Have they been quicker to action without having a sort of state entity doing it, or how is it actually working with the businesses?
I think at the port, we're actually very pleased when we first developed our Clean Air Action Plan. A lot of, and also, let me say also, there were a lot of grants available for people who were early action, taking early action to clean their facilities, their equipment. So people took advantage of that, and we're happy to work closely with the port to make improvements at their facility. And they work closely, our tenants work very closely with our local air agencies also. They all seem to really know what they need to do to get things cleaned up. So we didn't see a big, I don't think that the port didn't realize any difference really in our business operations because of the environmental regulations and the programs that the port's putting in place. I think that is a legitimate concern. I mean, we do know that there are ports being developed in, like even a large port in Mexico being developed. So there certainly is discussion of that, but we still do have the best infrastructure here for bringing things in and moving things. So we're really not that concerned that we're turning anyone away. We don't make it easy, but we're not losing people.
The question I had was, what is the current power plant operated from? Where does that, was it coal?
No, the current plant is actually natural gas also. And yes, it's a steam plant, but it's powered by natural gas. What's happened is it's just become so much less efficient. You know, as it gets older, it runs more and produces less energy. And that one operates very similarly to the new one. It's what we call a peaker plant. So in those summer days when the demand for energy exceeds what we can produce or bring in from other outside sources, that's when it runs. Pasadena is also a member of the California Independent System Operator, which means we're part of the larger grid that serves Southern California. And if demand exceeds supply elsewhere, the CalISO, Independent System Operator, can call on all of us to start our plants to help provide that electricity. That's an obligation that we have as a member of that system operation. So those are the real circumstances under which that plant runs.
The other question I had was for Teresa. At the port, there's the shore power.
Yes.
How is that power? What does that mean? They're putting in there, and they're not emitting it locally, but where's that power coming from? Because that's increasing energy draw.
Right, you're right, it does. And all of we're part of the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, so it's all, and I'm not, you know, so you're right. There's, it's moving, it's not, I still want to think it's much cleaner than what's coming from the ships. But that is also something we do work closely, Department of Water and Power is another city department that we are working very closely with, because we also need infrastructure improvements to be able to support everything we're you know, we want to electrify as much as possible in the port. And so we're working very closely with them. And I know our Department of Water and Power is looking at ways to restructure and increase their renewable energies as well. So I don't know the specifics of their program, but I know that they're trying to make improvements as well.
I do not live in the city of Pasadena. I have Southern California Edison, and they have a program which reduces your bill by allowing them to shut off your air conditioning on real hot days and for 30 minutes at a time or something. I was wondering if Pasadena also has this program, and if not, how are they considering it?
We have had that program in the past. We actually, it was not very popular. What we do have, though, is in the event that we are not able to provide power for whatever reason, we do have a list of people who have set up voluntary restrictions on their power. So we do have such a program. We are in the process of kind of revamping it to see if we can promote it differently and encourage more information, more interest in it, perhaps. But as I said the first time around, we didn't have a lot of participation. But I know there's programs like that out there. Some folks are interested in it, will always sign up. What had happened is some of the people that had signed up, when we actually took them offline for one reason, because we didn't have enough power, they called immediately and said, turn it back on. So we found out that it wasn't as effective as we needed it to be. So we're looking at, again, there's something that we can do better, but yes, it is a well-known program and something we would follow.
From a couple of the questions, this one that we've just had and Kathy's question about, is there any way to encourage letting us as citizens feel the impact of loss of energy? I think that there should be more discussion of this, and I realize, having lived here in this area for about 40 years, that there have been times in the past when we were encouraged during the summer not to use water, and we all cut back so enthusiastically that the next thing that happened was water power had to give an extra charge because, we weren't using enough, we weren't being able to pay your employees. So I understand that you're in a dilemma and a kind of a conflict of interest here. And if we all cut back terrifically and dramatically, you'd have problems because you're counting on a certain amount of money coming in. But I still think that it's a very valid discussion. When sequestering happened and all of a sudden air traffic controllers were cut way back, next thing that happened was all of our Congress people said, hey, we can't get around on planes. And that's when we knew all of the air traffic controllers were put right back on. And all of that was discouraged. And I'm thinking that I just spent 2 weeks in Mexico where nobody expects to be able to drink the water from their tap. And well, now this is a good way they're all boiling their water, and we walls serve boiling water and you get sick. You know, the people are not expecting this, but when I kind of thought, this is the way to go, everybody said, no, it's not the way to go at all. We don't want to go back to third world standards or anything. We want to try to boost our standards. But I still feel there should be more conversation about how to make us as citizens feel the pinch and be more cooperative and be maybe a little bit more proactive in the discussion.
Does anyone want to answer that? About making people feel the pinch?
Good point, Jenny. Then when they feel it,
Okay, so we'll go to David.
First, thanks to the three of you for coming out on this Saturday morning to talk about this topic. It's refreshing to see people in local and regional agencies, state agency, committed to this kind of work. When you see what's going on in Washington, it seems to be an endless gridlock. It's very discouraging back there. Shari, I have a question about solar power. You mentioned a review of the solar department, Water Power's solar program. As many of you know, there's two types of solar power. You can have your photovoltaic panels on top of your roof, whether it be a house or a business or whatever. In the case of Caltech, you have a huge parking structure that has a massive solar panel installation. Or you can have something out in the desert where maybe the sun shines a lot more than it does here in Los Angeles, especially during the wintertime, in which case you're involved in transmission lines, possibility of interruption of those transmission lines sometimes, and of course the cost. And also in the desert, you have the impact perhaps on habitat, whether it be desert-born tortoises or whatever. A lot of people feel that it's very important to move in the direction toward distributed solar panels on people's roofs. In other words, let's distribute them throughout the city, then we don't have to have these power lines that come into the city. For the large utilities, let's say private utilities like Edison, it's kind of inconvenient because they control the power coming in and you can make some money on it. Okay, they can't really make money in most cases off what's sitting on your roof. What do you see as the attitude and the future program of Department of Water Power in this regard? Bearing in mind, according to what I've read the last little bit here, the cost of solar panels has dropped about like 75% in the last 5 years or so. And there's some estimates within another 5 to 10 years that solar energy is going to be just as competitive, in fact, perhaps cheaper than some of the other traditional forms of energy. Admittedly, solar energy is intermittent. If the sun doesn't shine, there's a problem. And that's why you have to have this backup gas plant for the moment anyway. But can you address the direction you would be moving in the new department in terms of solar energy in the future?
Thank you, David. Interestingly enough, it's not only solar that Pasadena Water and Power is interested in. Part of that great study I was telling you about really explores what we call just all distributed generation opportunities. So as technology continues to improve and efficiency programs improve, we are designing a rate structure that will encourage other types of distributed generation also. For our commercial customers, that might be fuel cells. That Caltech and AT&T are two companies, I think Huntington Hospital also here in town, already have fuel cells on site. And so what we as a utility need to do is to design rates that are more attractive to encourage people to do more of that. So the solar, as you know, we have rates designed right now, so if someone produces excess solar energy beyond what they need to use, they sell it back to the utility. And we actually pay them a rate that's higher than what we would pay for energy elsewhere to further encourage that kind of investment. So we are really looking to expand that, and even as the technology changes, we might have very small local generation, little fuel cells that people might put in their backyard. It's not here yet, but word is that it's coming. And so we are looking at a wide array of distributed generation rates that we can say either encouraging people to do that kind of investment, or at the very least make sure that, as they're doing it, if they can't sell it back to us, we can incent them to do it. So it is an enigma, and it's a very strange dilemma, but like I said, for us, we realize that as a utility, our business plan has to change. And it's not going to change overnight. And for all of the folks in this room who are so enthusiastic about this and who believe in this as much as I do, certainly, we do have a large contingent of customers, of course, who don't have the wherewithal and don't have the resources to do the kinds of things that all of us in this room would like to do. So as a community utility, we need to consider all of our customers. And so for everyone in this room who's enthusiastic about it, we'll have, a hardship case or an economic reality from another family that just doesn't have the resources to do this. So we hear you, we believe in this as much as you do, but we have a responsibility to all of our customers. So we have to move at a pace that's acceptable for everyone, not just the folks that have this kind of passion for it. I think even some folks that are economically disadvantaged have the same passion. They would love to do these kinds of programs. And so what we have to do is develop, the kind of rate structure that can support keeping the wires up there and the poles intact, because we're still going to need those. But also makes room in our portfolio for the kinds of programs that we have.
So actually, one question to follow up on that is, a lot of environmental policies were developed because there's such an uneven impact on low-income communities versus other stakeholders. So I want to hear from each of you on how your processes have changed and how you ensure that all stakeholders are at the table when policies are being made, especially those in areas that are incredibly impacted, especially along the port, a lot of the communities along the freeways there. How do you make sure that all stakeholders are involved and that everybody's sharing equally in the benefits as well as the costs?
I think in the last, I want to say maybe 6 to 7 years, the port's really, more so than ever, heard from the community and been involved in much more outreach than we had been before. As I mentioned, before the focus was just growing business and not so concerned with everything else happening. But, now, we really don't take steps without looking at all the impacts, and especially with our community. So we do have a very good dialogue with our Wilmington community and San Pedro community and other groups who come in to help, support them and to make sure they're understanding what's happening. So it has changed. I think the focus has changed, and we do include our communities and try to take it into consideration. And also within the last, I would say, probably 5 years, there's been a lot more investment into the community, where, especially in Wilmington, there was one area that the port was purchasing for many years, and it was to develop storage facilities for containers, and through a lot of efforts from the community, now that's a 30-acre park. So, that took many years to get to that point, and that wasn't the port's, as the port was purchasing up this property, that wasn't what the port had in mind. But it's beautiful. It's really impressive. It's really a source of pride for the community and everyone who helped to make it happen. So it's kind of changed our focus.
Well, at the state level, we have a lot of stakeholder groups, lots of stakeholder interaction. And generally, the larger companies are pretty well represented at the table because they have environmental consultants or lobbyists that participate. Communities, ethnic communities, low-income communities are generally very well represented because they have a lot of advocates that come to the table on their behalf, and they are well organized. As you heard in the port area, different pockets throughout California, so they have representatives and will come in next. Who we really struggle to, and the environmental community is very well represented. We meet before every board meeting. We have a meeting with the environmental and health advocates group to just sort of give them an update what's coming aboard to hear their issues and concerns. We meet with the air districts throughout the state likewise before every board meeting, and we also have a separate discussion as required, so we know what's going on in each of the 35 air districts. Who's not at the table most of the time are the small business owners and operators, the mom and pops, the people who are busy running their shop, The guy you'll see when you go walk down the street to the frame shop or to the bookstore, they're not at the table. And why? They're not well organized. They have trade associations. Some belong. Most trade associations will come and say, well, we represent the restaurant owners. And I'll say, how many actual restaurant owners are in your business, in your association? So they're not well represented. And that's a problem because as we move forward with electrification, we're putting a burden, of course, on the utilities. And with electrifying ports and all these things, the small business people are also going to be needing to make changes, and they are not at the table. So one of my jobs is to go beat the bushes for them and force them forward. And so any that you encourage or see, we have their websites and things that they can use to actually green their business, to reduce their electricity, to save money, so that when rates go up, they're not actually paying the increased bottom line cost. But that's a group that when you talk to folks or if you own a business, you really need to get involved with your local air district, with your water quality folks, with the state, because these things matter. We are putting back in place a small business advisory committee. We're working on it now. It should be up and running in the next couple of months. A major priority for me. There's something else that you guys need to know, that as individuals, your voice really matters. When you talk to your legislator, when you talk to your city councilman, when you come to the public meetings, come informed. Take the time to get to know as much as you can before you get there. I'm talking to the choir, you all already know they're going to be here, but please pass that on. And one thing more, when we're talking about climate, new research is starting to look at what happens. We're in climate change, you guys, right? Everybody knows that. But what happens to help communities recover after a climate-related incident like Hurricane Sandy, Superstorm Sandy, or the heat waves that happened in Chicago in the mid-90s? What are they finding? It's very, very new, is that communities with very robust small business constituents do better. So in the study of the heat wave in Chicago, Eric Kleinenberg found two communities, both low income. The community that had a very robust small business, diverse small business base, those people had a significantly less death rate than the people in the next community. Looking at life expectancy, people in the low income community actually had 5-year longer life expectancy than in the more affluent community nearby. So people are starting to look at it and try to understand why this is the case. But be aware that the mix of businesses and industries that you have really matters. And bringing them to the table is critical. So anything you can do to help us do that, we'd appreciate it.
And I think within the city of Pasadena, as anybody who lives here would know, we are a very, very active community. Our city council has a lot of outreach into their districts. And as a utility, when we did the resource plans for both water and power, we did large stakeholder groups were put together, pulling people from every area of the city, both geographically and economically, with the idea that if this is going to be a 20-year blueprint, and we do this on the water side also, this has to be something that has community support. And this was a huge outreach effort. Each of these plans took a year or more to develop, multiple meetings and lots of public outreach. Lots of meetings were held in every geographical area within the city to solicit input, to get people to come forward and talk about what was of concern to them. And that's why we believe these are both very well balanced plans. Again, it's about the reliability, sustainability, the cost effectiveness. These are the things, the plan we can live with for a long time into the future. And so even as we come forward with rate impacts and rate studies, we'll be doing the same thing. There'll be public hearings, there'll be meetings in community centers, at district meetings throughout the city, because this rate structure has to be something that is supported by the community. It goes a long way when we talk to the investors. Because remember, there's a large investor community out there. There's people out there who are buying our bonds, who are investing in the utility that say, we're willing to collectively put up $30 or $50 million or whatever the number happens to be for you to invest in your pipes and your pumps and your reservoirs and your holes and vaults and all the things that keep your utility running. And so we have an obligation to those investors. And that is to have a rate structure that will support what we're asking to do, And they're very mindful. They're like our stockholders. So when we sit in front of them and talk about what we're doing and how we're going to pay for it and what's happening, that's another community that we have a lot of responsibility to. And so as we go forward, we're very careful to make sure our rate structure supports what we're trying to do and the community supports that structure.
Okay, so we actually have the last two questions here. We can do questions afterwards as well. I know Shari needs to make a flight. So we have the last two comments here.
I think this is a quick one. It was what we were talking about with solar before. You mentioned, that not everybody can afford to pay for that, especially certainly in single-family homes, but in apartment buildings. And there's a lot of money in Pasadena. There's developers coming in and building a lot of new condo developments. And I was thinking, but is there anything, in the city plan for them, energy-wise, they have to contribute, like to put on solar panels on the roof, or as part of their package that they get from the city to develop it?
That's an excellent question, and something that it's not just a utility question, obviously. We've been working with the city planning department and other areas to say, do we have construction standards? Whether that includes solar panels on the roof, certain levels of insulation, different kinds of construction materials being used. Those are all, there's different pieces of that are in place. It's not a wholesale sort of program that we can point to yet. I don't believe we require solar installation on some of these new apartment buildings that you see going up. It's a matter of whether or not it's economically feasible for them for the most part. And that's another thing that we struggle with, because the city has come to the utility and other departments as well, looking now for economic development assistance, as times have been tough for all cities and all agencies recently. So now the question is what can the city, including its utility, offer businesses to come here to make us attractive, so that not to pick on Monrovia or any other city, but so if somebody's looking to set up a business there, why not here instead? And so we're looking to make our utility rates attractive to them, to maybe offer incentives for them to come in. And some of the programs we are looking at is to say, let us help you make a long-term investment in your energy efficiency, and say we can help you with installation of the solar on your roof, or if the property calls for it or allows for it. So those are things we're looking at. Unfortunately, like I said, there's not a truly comprehensive plan that the city has, but it is something that we are, in fact, meeting just a couple of times already with more meetings to come to try to put something in like that.
Okay, we had some additional questions. Go ahead.
Just add one thing we should all be aware of. There is in the state of California now a new green building code. So new building standards if you're building in California.
Okay, so two quick questions.
Yeah, I live in Pasadena, this might be kind of nitpicky, but every once in a while we get a mailing from the Department of Water and Power that says, shows your usage, and it shows, are you better than your neighbors, worse than your neighbors, whatever. And is there a way to get that, done online or something? I mean, just looking at that slide about, that we export a lot of waste paper. Can that be done online, or can it be included with our bills so that we don't have a whole separate mailing?
You're part of the O-Power program. Yes. Yes, you're a member of our O-Power program. Not all of our residential customers are a part of it. It's actually a random selection of about 25,000 of our customers. So the initial rollout was paper only. That was the company that did that. We are currently working with them right now to do an online option. There's some customers who prefer to get the paper, but what we'll do is allow customers to opt out of the printed copies. So you should see that hopefully within the next few months.
Thank you. I have a question for Teresa. This is regarding the freight out of the port. I'd be interested to know what percentage is done by truck, what percentage is done by rail, and what's the sort of, how much more polluting is one than the other in terms of air pollution, and also what is the current status of the rail connections moving further out of the port? How effective are they? Are they growing? Healthy? How's it going?
That's a tough question for me to answer. I don't know the breakdown. I don't know the breakdown right now. What moves? You're saying cargo coming back in through the port? No, both. I don't know the breakdown.
This is incoming cargo.
Incoming cargo. Okay.
I don't know the breakdown off the top of my head, and I'm going to point you to the Port's website for that information. A lot of what makes Port of Los Angeles more attractive than even, Port of Long Beach is now working on their on-dock rail. Port of LA, a lot of our terminals already have on-dock rail, which is a more efficient way to move cargo off of the terminal rather than have trucks come in and pick it up. So we do have that infrastructure in place. Whether it's one cleaner than the other, rail is cleaner because there's less rail currently than truck moving. So if we look at our overall emissions, the trucks were our bigger area. Rail was smaller. Again, I'll point you to the website so you can see all of that. Our city council just approved a rail yard that would build rail and move it throughout the, out of the south area, the South Bay. But it comes with a lot of, what's the word I want to use? It's right adjacent to communities in Long Beach. That was a fight to have that approved. I'm not sure what the status of that would be. I'm sure the lawsuits are being filed today, to stop that rail yard. Again, all that information is on our, you can find information on our website. If you'd like to, I'll give you my card and you can email me and I can have someone else in our CEQA group who worked on the project get back to you because I'm sure all this information is fresh in their minds. The port would prefer seeing more rail because that is more efficient and cleaner. And we're going to continue to look at technologies for making that cleanest available also.
Okay, okay, we have one last comment.
I just wanted to thank all of you, not only for educating us and for providing such a positive forum. As I've told you privately, this is the first positive environmental forum that I have been to maybe ever. It is wonderful that you are out there actually making change and that you are proud of it and that you are educating us as to what the facts are and where there's room for movement from us. And thank you for keeping up the good work. And I'd like to thank Felicia for this incredible, positive environmental forum. Thank you.
Thank you so much to our speakers. Very intelligent, great women who are doing wonderful things out there, and we're getting all of us involved.